Hi there, guys. It's Christy. Happy Sunday to you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. So I'm going to jump right into it. This is not going to be a particularly happy weekend, Winters, because of the stuff that's been going on in the US. And I have to talk about it. You had a 8 p.m. where you are. Well, hi there, James. 6 a.m. Listen when you wake up. Definitely go to sleep if you've not been to sleep yet. Neo R Ripshaft in the chat. I was thinking last night about doing a show, what I was going to put together, and then I turned on the news and discovered that there had been another mass shooting in the United States. So, I have to talk about it. You can't just sort of like, oh yeah, 20 people were shot dead. Now let's skip on to something else. Hold on, I'm just going to shift my position here. There we go. All right. Sitting facing the camera a bit more as opposed to facing off kilter. I think that probably the easiest thing to do is just for me to go ahead and bring up just 1 second here. I'm going to adjust my frame for the other window a little bit here before I transition over, just because I've shifted my body now, so I need to transition here. So there's a chat. Hey guys, everyone. 250, what is there even to say about mass shootings at this point? We know why it happens. We know the Republicans aren't going to let anyone fix it. Yeah, although I don't think that that's a reason to not talk about it, because I agree, those are all valid points. We still have to talk about it, because the moment we don't talk about this anymore and we just accept sort of the defeatism of the situation, that's when, we stop moving forward for change. So I do feel I'm going to have to talk about it. There are too many things involved with this that need to be kind of broken down. So let me first get a bit of coffee. So good morning to you guys if you want your morning coffee. Or an afternoon cup of tea, whatever it is you're enjoying. Let's go ahead and get up my favorite go-to news source that I pay for, the Washington Post, because they'll have the most updated information. So for those of you who weren't paying attention to the news last night or don't live in America and this wasn't at the top of your feed, there was another mass shooting, this time in Texas, at an El Paso mall, El Paso, Texas. And there are a lot of elements to this crime that we can undergo. So first of all, let's just talk about the absolute tragedy to the families who are involved. Let me just close this window out here. Sorry, but the 20 people are dead. Dozens more are in the hospital. There are 20 families that are absolutely, devastated today. And their extended family and their friends and the entire community. This is going to ripple through. People were going to a Walmart on a Saturday morning. School starts for elementary students and high school students in the United States oftentimes around the first part of September. So going in August to get your school supply shopping in is a very, very common busy time of year. Apparently the Walmart had anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000 people, according to reports I saw, moving in and out of it and actively being in that part of the building or part of the mall and the Walmart part. And it was also part of a mall complex. So it wasn't just sort of a standalone Walmart in the middle of nowhere. It was associated with an entire shopping complex, from my understanding. And that, so the fact that it's a Walmart becomes important. Its location becomes important, but I'll get onto that. What do we say at this point as a nation to the families of those who've been died and injured? We failed you. We failed you. As your fellow citizens, we failed you because we failed to elect representatives who would put prioritizing your safety and your family's safety above gun profits. And as 250 said in the chat, it's not like we haven't had this conversation before. It's not like that we don't have any options in terms of instituting new policies or enforcing existing regulations or funding certain prevention and analysis elements in our society about gun violence more fully, so we can understand how to identify and stop and prevent, like what are the most effective ways to reduce mass shootings and just generally gun violence, in whether it's suicide or shootings like this or accidental shootings. Do you know how many toddlers in America injure themselves because they get access to a handgun that their parents or their parents' friends or some adult around them wasn't properly keeping maintained and locked up? And this is it's an ongoing, I mean, we might as well be at, like a slight civil war. If these mass shootings were ISIS attacks instead of usually white guys who are upset about their loss of status in society, social isolation, then we would be having, police sweeps. We would have orange and red threat alerts when it comes to assessing domestic violence. If these were brown guys instead of white guys, we would consider ourselves under attack from whatever fundamentalist group was doing it, but we don't. And as a consequence, we don't take that part of it seriously and people die. So I guess, this is it. It's all bundled up. All of these elements are bundled up together. I'm going to try to keep notes. I'm going to get there, James, about the Christchurch shooting. But first, before we rush over to talk about the bigger national issues, I don't know how to take enough time to acknowledge the tremendous loss of life and suffering and pain that we allow to happen again and again. And this is another community devastated. There are people now who, when the Florida Pulse shooting happened, or Aurora, or the one in Las Vegas, or right? I remember I saw last night on the news that people, the mayor of Parkland was reaching out to the mayor of El Paso and Aurora, and these communities are traumatized. It's not, it is an individual level trauma, but our cities, our communities have major traumas. And then when these mass shootings happen again, it brings back the day, the terror, the pain, the overwhelming, fear, whatever else that people were going through. As a nation, we are traumatizing ourselves. For what? So the gun manufacturers can profit off of selling more products? As 250 said, gun control was super popular with white people in the 1960s when the Black Panthers were arming themselves. True. And we have a history of banning war machines. We have a ban, for instance, on submachine guns and machine guns that came about during the 1920s because gangsters had their little Tommy guns that were just basically kind of modern, their version of the AR-15. And those were banned. So we can ban things. We lack the political will as a people. We seem to be willing to die by 1,000 cuts. And those 1,000 cuts are 20 dead, permanent injuries sometimes, lifetime, recovery times, a lifetime of trauma. For what? Is this the price? Nobody said that this was the price of having gun freedom. No one who wrote the Constitution said, look, we're going to give you, we're going to make sure that you have the right to bear arms, but in exchange, you're going to have to basically, live in terror that your fellow citizens might come along and massacre you. So, all right. Again, getting off topic. I'm trying to focus on the victims. We don't know their names yet. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information coming out in the next couple of weeks. And before I move on, that is what I want to acknowledge and put my emphasis into is the human cost of this, because there are all kinds of policy issues we can talk about and all kinds of political problems that we can talk about, and we will. But at the end of the day, the reason why we have to talk about this, the reason why this has to matter, why we have to develop the will, is to save lives. That's it. The issue around gun safety is one of life or death in America right now for Americans. And the people who are killing us are Americans. But for some reason, we tolerate it because it's predominantly white men who are doing this, it seems, to me, anyway. That's why we put up with it. If this was brown men who are walking into Walmarts and doing this to terrorize Americans, then there would definitely be all kinds of new legislation introduced. But because it's the dominant population and associated with the masculine notions of guys who just snap, I can't do anything about it. They're, oh, if he would have talked to somebody, but accepting that level of violence as if it's a natural product of American culture, which could be argued at this point. Yeah, the Supreme Court has not done a lot on First Amendment. They had some initial stuff, but they're getting increasingly, activists. Scalia, for instance, helped invent a new law, or basically said that the founders wanted, you to be able to defend your home with one hand while picking up a phone with the other, except, of course, you're talking about musket rifles and no telephones when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were added. So conservatives are happy to be activists when it comes to undermining women's right to make medical choices about terminating a pregnancy and making sure that Americans can kill each other very, very efficiently. That seems to be very important to the current Supreme Court. Oh, and overturning precedents that will, protect voting rights and things. Right. So the narrative goes, it was around 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and in an El Paso mall, in the Walmart of an El Paso mall, a 21-year-old white man who was dressed, basically came prepared. He had sun goggles, he had eye protection, ear protection, I think. He was wearing hand protection because apparently if the manifesto attributed to him is actually his writings, he knew that the guns would get hot, and so he wanted to make sure he could still fire a lot of bullets and kill people. He started shooting as he approached the Walmart and continued to shoot as he got into the Walmart, and people were fleeing, trying to get away from him. He was going through systematically, apparently. I haven't seen too much coverage of that. I have some possible speculation about who he was targeting if we look at if the manifesto attributed to him is actually tied to him. And then it gets a little fuzzy there in terms of the timeline, but my understanding is that the police arrived and he was taken into custody with not a scratch on him. Isn't it amazing? Like Dylan Roof and this white guy, these white guys who managed to be mass shooters, standing there literally with the gun in their hands and bodies on the floor. And yet police managed to get them into the back of the cars without suffocating them to death or beating them to death. And yet they can't do that for black men who are under arrest for selling individual cigarettes on the corner. So another white guy taken into custody. I don't know if, like Dylan Roof, they had him go to a Burger King before he was taken to the police station because it was going to be his last moments of freedom. Yeah, they did. They got Dylan Roof Burger King, or took him to Burger King, or got him a takeaway or something while he was in custody right after having killed people, being a mass murderer. And that's what we know in terms of the facts. So I don't want to give this guy any attention. I don't want to say this dirtball's name. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to talk about a manifesto that was published on 8chan. It's kind of I'm not sure if it's 8chan or 4chan. But we're going to talk a little bit about this piece of shit who carried out the mass shooting. And I'm not even going to say alleged. Police got him red-handed. He was in the mall with his guns. We've got him on tape. I know that allegedly is what we're supposed to do, but this guy is a piece of shit. And what we know about him is very little. What is known is that he drove, I think, a ridiculous length of time, like hours and hours, from one side of Texas to El Paso. He's not an El Paso native. He actually lives on the other side of Texas. And he drove to this El Paso, I'm going to guess, for two reasons. So for the purposes of the rest of this, I'm going to be basing this assumption off, basing my comments off the fact that I think the manifesto, which I read last night on Twitter, it's like 4 pages long. Don't feel like you need to read it. Don't give this guy any more, attention. He's already got more than he deserves as far as I'm concerned. But he, in there, the manifesto mentions, well, it has several elements to it, but the ones that become relevant for his selection of targets was that he has a rabid hatred of anyone who's Hispanic and not white. I don't really know if he's into the whole, kill with when it comes to black people part of the race war, but he's really in this manifesto focused on Hispanic people, considering that where he was standing in Texas was actually part of Mexico before it was part of Texas, and people who lived there was able to stay there. Of course Texas is going to have a strong Mexican heritage because it was taken from Mexico. And he's ranting, the manifesto rants about okay, so one is he's a complete racist bigot, POS. That's one element. The other thing that he's upset about is the corporate, sort of multinational corporatism, because he sees corporations as wanting to bring in more immigrants in order to keep wages down. So we talked on the happy hour, Kevin and I, about that incel show, about these guys who feel not only isolated from women, which is whom they vent against, their horrible misogyny and violence sometimes, incels, but also that they are isolated from society in general and feel apart, distant from society. This young man was claiming, and he's 21, so what the fuck did he know? Shut your dumb fucking mouth at 21. I'm sorry, you haven't lived long enough or worked long enough to know anything at that point. That's why people are still going to university when they're 21, or getting skills at that point in your life. You're still training, you're still learning. And he was convinced that whatever job he was going to get was going to be eliminated by automation or done by some kind of, immigrants. And so I think the choice of Walmart was a combination of, one, the fact that it was on the El Paso border. It's a Walmart where both Americans and Mexicans shop. So its location, the El Paso shopping center here, has a lot of people who cross the border from Mexico to get stuff in America, as well as Americans who go to the local Walmart. And both communities intermingle there, both nationalities, people come and go, and it's a very diverse, cosmopolitan, if you want to say, insofar as diversity, a little shopping center. And I think, this is speculation on my part, I think he chose Walmart because it represents sort of the corporate American companies that he hates. And also I think he chose El Paso because it's a blue city. It has a low crime rate, and it's a success when it comes to the integration, the passing of people in their daily lives past each other, of Mexicans and Americans living in peace. And Mexican Americans, and maybe some Americans who are also American Mexicans. But basically, it's a little cosmopolitan bubble of diversity and acceptance, and he wanted to destroy that. Okay, thanks for banning a racist, 250. That's why I gave you moderator powers. So I think that this is why he targeted this place. And the other thing, too, that I haven't necessarily seen commented on, and I don't think it's a major point, but of course, one of the things that people will say is, if only a good guy with a gun would have been here for part of that. If only there would have been somebody who could have shot up this guy. Sorry, I'm going to transition my screen here a little bit. If only there was somebody who could have shot this guy, then, everything would have been all right. Well, the fact is that there were people, there was an interview on CNN that I saw of a guy who was in the Foot Locker, Marine, trained, a soldier. He's used to seeing combat. He heard the shots, recognized them for what they were right away, and actually was carrying a gun. because he has a concealed carry permit. Oh, did I mention that? Okay, and also very importantly, he's black. All right, so this becomes important because during his interview, he said, "Look, I served in the military. I went into sort of automatic training mode when I heard the shots. I left the Foot Locker planning on trying to find out who was doing the shooting. And then he saw some police, and apparently like the police were looking at him askance, and he thought, well, maybe they're going to think I'm the shooter." But on his way over to approaching the shots, he saw a whole bunch of kids that were without parents, kids who were just unattended and upset and crying. And he immediately changed his priority from trying to find out where the shots were coming to protecting these kids. So he and someone else apparently like were picking up the kids, moving them away, trying to keep their lives safe. So even when you have a good guy with a gun, he might have other things to do. She might have other things to do than running up and trying to find an active shooter. The other thing is, if I'm not mistaken, Walmart sells guns. I don't know if that particular Walmart sold guns, but it's not like, if the guy was walking into a Walmart where guns were available for sale, people would have both the guns and the cartridges on site to load a bunch of weapons and go after him. That didn't happen. Now, I don't expect people to do this. Is it. I don't expect people to do this. I want to live in a country where you don't have to wear a concealed weapon on you because there might be a mass shooter at your local Denny's or the Walmart or the Target or your Piggly Wiggly. Right? I understand that guy's feeling about being mistaken for a shooter. Yeah, of course, because you know what happened the last time there was a mass shooter in a mall? There was a security person or someone else who was a black man who was responding, and the cops shot him because they assumed he was the shooter because he was black. So yeah, I do think that the guy who has every right to think that if there's a shooting going on and I'm a black man and I want to help, the cops might kill me instead of the white kid who's in the Walmart shooting everything up right now because of my skin color. I absolutely believe that. And yeah, Eric Garner is not the only example. There's a whole bunch of names that we can go through in terms of police violence. So it is a white privilege, to have when you have the white suspect arrested without a scratch, but an innocent black man who's responding in terms of security gets shot and killed. Yeah, that's white privilege right there. Where were we? There's so much, again, to unpack on this. So we were talking about people responding. Yes. And here's a frustration for me, a real frustration. Sadly, the only thing I had to watch last night about the coverage because of the time zone difference in the day, it was a Saturday, was CNN. And I had to watch Wolf Blitzer because he was the only one that was really covering this. Wolf Blitzer is awful. He is terrible. He's been terrible for 20 years. Wolf Blitzer has been the same age since I was at university in the 90s. I swear to God, Wolf Blitzer and Patrick Stewart don't age. They've both been like 62 years old for the last 25 years. Both of them. I really believe this. But Wolf Blitzer was awful. I mean, he was just really, really terrible. And because he sounded like a vulture, he kept going on and on about, the death counts are going to go up and we're going to learn more people have died and we're going to learn that children have died. And because it didn't seem like he was saying it. Also, this was what was really weird. He wasn't saying it like he felt it. He was just sort of almost it felt like vulture is sort of like a media vulture, glorifying it and just sort of reveling in, we're going to have this really high death count. It was really gross. I really don't like Wolf Blitzer. I wish he would retire. I wish Chris Matthews would retire. Both of them are past their sell-by dates. There are younger people with different perspectives who could come in and do the same job and not gross people out. But that's a complete tangent. Right, so I was watching Wolf Blitzer. He was, saying that, going off on a tangent now. I forgot the point that I was going to make. Where was I? Watching the news, Wolf Blitzer, he was terrible. And what was the point that I was going to bring up? I need to start writing notes. I have too many thoughts in my head. Well, I'll just pick one at random because there are so many things to potentially talk about. And I need to start doing verbal pauses. I do that when I have less things. I'm less confident about what I want to say. And I'm still tired, if I'm honest, guys. I spent all day in bed yesterday resting. I'm going to go right back and relax after this. All right. So yes, Wolf Blitzer was talking, glorifying the crap. And let's... sorry. Christy's crashing, you guys. Christy's crashing. The manifesto. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I mentioned already some of the points in the manifesto and why I am linking them the way that I am to the El Paso choice. He, in his manifesto, again, if this is the one that's linked, and there's a lot of things that we can learn about the shooting to triangulate it against the manifesto, because in his manifesto he talked about, one, he mentioned going after a soft target, which is what the Walmart was, and he was saying about why you don't choose it as a soft target, and he sort of, in the manifesto, it's also kind of a call to war. It's a bit of a race war manifesto. He did mention he was inspired by the Christchurch shooter, and he, mentions in there that, the Democrats, in his opinion, want to have a one-party state, which is projection, because it's the Republicans who actually are on their way to a one-party political state. But he feared the displacement of what we would consider the white patriarchal Christian, cis man, dominance of media, of political power, of economic power. And he sees that as a threat. Apparently his notion of America isn't big enough to include, because he's a white supremacist, anyone other than sort of that WASP notion of America as the default. And as a consequence of his bigotry and his hatred and his racism and his small-mindedness, he worked himself up into a point of othering people to the point where he could commit murder, mass murder, in a state where he knows there is the death penalty. So he was going to die. He's going to die, sort of regardless. When he talked about in his manifesto, he claimed he was going to go out in a hail of bullets, or if he was going to get arrested, he was going to off himself. Seems like he chickened out at the end. He claimed that the only way he would be taken alive is if he was subdued in some way. I have a feeling he just chickened out at the end. But because he did, now instead of talking about him in the past tense, the state of Texas is going to have, it was Abbott too. I remember something, Abbott said something awful. That was it. I remember. Sorry, I'll make a note. So at this point he's in custody. That means the police are going to be a bit more hesitant to put forward details or just open up his social media accounts, because all of that is going to be collected and become part of the trial. We know that Facebook said that they were working with authorities, that they'd found an account with this piece of shit's name associated with it, a Facebook and an Instagram. They shut those down. I didn't see anything about his Twitter account, but it does look like he posted to 4chan and 8chan. So the typical places of radicalization for white American male terrorists, mostly American terrorists, domestic terrorists, is 4chan and 8chan, the Donald, places like that where white supremacists hide behind edgy humor and it's just a joke memes in order to push their hate. We also talked about the incel forums, which is another place where young men are radicalized into murdering women in order to express a frustration over their lack of sexual dominance. Combined with a lot of other things like mental health issues and the lack of mental health funding and toxic masculinity and a culture in which men emotionally suffer but don't feel they can talk about it or get help, which puts them in a downward spiral. And the stupid thing, of course, about toxic masculinity, it's only by overturning toxic masculinity that you can deal with those emotions, and yet men who cling to the patriarchy reject the idea that they need help, and or to change their attitudes, or to invert the or dismantle their patriarchal thinking to get the help they need. Texas Governor Greg Abbott. already said that it's too soon. It's too soon to talk about why this happened or political solutions. And I'm tired of being told that it's too soon to talk about dealing with these mass domestic terrorist incidents, because it's either too soon or it's too late. It's too soon to talk about it afterwards, and then another one happens and it's too late and we didn't talk about it and we didn't do anything. And that is that's where the NRA kind of wants us trapped, in this position of always telling us, no, it's too soon, don't politicize these deaths. And then by the time goes away, there's another mass shooting and it's too late to talk about it because it's too soon again. It's always too soon because we're always having another mass fucking shooting. And people don't have to live like this. Watching the news reports, they were interviewing someone who worked at a mall store, and the employee reported that the month before they had just gone through an active shooter simulation in the mall. What should happen, or what you should do if there's an active shooter. Do you realize how insane this has become, Americans? I don't think because maybe you're in the water of the boiling water of these mass shootings, you don't see how crazy your lives have become. You are terrorizing American children by putting them through active shooter drills, which and more often than not will cause them anxiety and stress than actually, giving them information they'll be able to use when, hopefully they'll never have a mass shooting or an active shooter situation in their life. But you have entire generation now of American school kids who are being taken through these psychologically traumatizing preparations. We're traumatizing our children instead of regulating guns. Instead of doing proper regulation, we're doing active shooter drills in stores, in churches, in bars, in temples, in synagogues. You're basically admitting that this is something that you have to live with, that this is something you have to tolerate, that this is just part of normal, everyday American life. Having the skills to know when you hear firearms going off, and assessing whether or not that is a firework or there's a mass shooting that's going on right around you. And then knowing, okay, so do I run? Do I hide? Like duck and cover steps? This is really how you want to live? This is how you want your kids to live? Always prepared for a mass shooting? Because this is what? More tolerable than background checks? More tolerable than funding a federal database so that guns can be tracked across purchases and traced back from crimes? That it's that horrible to fund public research into the impact of gun violence on our society and how to prevent it as a public health measure, which the NRA prevents. And it's, I can blame the American people where we do deserve blame. We do deserve blame. We get the government we want. I'm going to put a caveat by the 2016 election because of Russian interference. But for too long, the gun manufacturers, and the NRA does not represent gun owners. It doesn't. It represents gun manufacturers. It represents the corporate and the profit-making end of an industry that thrives on fear. The gun industry is like a parasite of fear. The more fear we have, the better they do. And so, of course, they want Americans to be constantly terrified and feeling like they need to reach for a gun. That's good for their bottom line. It's terrible for our country. It's terrible for the psychological well-being of our children and their kids. They're going to pass this on. We're going to pass on your active shooting skills to your kids before they go to primary school, before they go to kindergarten, in case there's a shooting at their school. We're seeing a change, though, I have to say. It feels like, as a consequence of Trump's election and the Women's March, those connections of progressive values, of not just being about, the Women's March wasn't about women's issues. It was about healthcare. It was about immigration reform. It was about gun violence. It was about domestic violence. It was about human trafficking. It was about the environment and climate change. It was about healthcare. It was about basically all progressive issues that we saw Trump standing against. And it feels, we've seen now some Democratic candidates who got elected with a pro-regulation, pro-gun safety position. And I think that's the wave of the future, especially in the Democratic Party. It is becoming less taboo for a candidate to say, I support universal background checks. I support funding gun violence as part of public health safety research. Because universal background checks has 90% support. A lot of these sensible gun reforms have support, but what we lack as voters is the political will to put that issue first. So we've got that element of it. And then there's just the fact that we as white Americans, and I'm going to generalize here to white America, we don't own our shit. We don't own the problems that come out of the white community. How many times have I heard some racist white cis POS dude bring up black on black crime out of freaking nowhere? Just, black on black crime. Like, they actually care about crime rates in the black community. They don't. They want to just say, look at all of these black people committing crimes against each other. Aren't they just such a criminal group? Well, what does it say about white people that we produce the more mass murderers? Multiple per year. Right? White American culture is producing mass murderers, mass shooters, domestic terrorists. We're quite happy to complain about Twitter not doing enough to shut down radical ISIS accounts on Twitter. But what are we doing to say, why aren't you shutting down domestic terrorist talk from American accounts? Oh, wait. Now suddenly it's free speech. Suddenly when white people want to talk about race wars and mass shootings, you've got Dylan Roof and you've got this guy here and other racist inspired acts of mass violence. Now it's a free speech issue. It's a mental health issue. It's not about the problems in the white community. We need to talk about the problems in the white community. We do. And we need to talk about it in a way that is about owning our shit, not making excuses or saying this is a one-off. These guys they are lone wolves, but they are a pack of lone wolves, and there are more behind them being radicalized online right now, who are the next mass shooters, who are posting on 4chan, who are posting on 8chan, who are in these incel forums. And yet, what are we doing to track these guys down? What are we doing to go after the radicalization of white people by other white people online? So 250 says, Thomas Smith put out an SIO last year where he said he's just totally against the Second Amendment. Do you think that could ever become politically tenable in the U.S.? I think that it's too difficult to overturn an amendment. Here's what I think is much easier. We can have an assault rifles ban. We had one before. We had the Brady Bill. When there was some political will to stand up to the NRA in the United States. So it's entirely possible. You have countries, I live in one. I live in Germany. And Switzerland's, not down the road, but practically American geography style, There are a lot of places in Europe where you can own guns. But what you don't have are these kinds of mass shootings. There's also the interpretation of it, right? So that's a really good point, James. The point of the Second Amendment, and this is what I was talking about, Scalia being an activist judge and inventing constitutional precedent. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of ... What they really mean by a well-regulated militia was slave patrols. It was empowering rich white men to hire poor white men into their own private, sort of militias in order to keep down slave rebellions. It's not about personal safety. It was not written that way. A militia isn't individual persons. A militia is a group for group societal, like public order, or in this case, a racist imposition of slavery, just like keeping a racist power system, slave power system in power, intact. When Scalia said, it was their intention for you to be able to, pick up the phone while you hold somebody with a handgun, if somebody breaks into your house and you've got them at gunpoint, you also want to be able to pick up the phone with the other hand and call the police, right? They always wrote, the well-regulated part as well. Although, to be fair, the Supreme Court has said that legislators have wide latitude in regulating unsafe guns or putting other conditions on it. They just don't choose to because Republicans let the NRA run amok in terms of access to guns. They like it that way because they can sell more guns. The less regulated the market, the more opportunity they have to move their products. I get distracted there, but in the 18th century, bear arms referred to more military action. They didn't mean carry a weapon. Yeah. And when it comes to, handguns kill 98% of the deaths. It would depend. Mithra, I don't doubt that number, but I would have to see exactly what kind of deaths they were talking about there. I'm sure when it comes to suicides, handguns would be right up there as a lethal way of killing yourself. And so I don't doubt in that case, also with domestic abuse. But when it comes to mass shootings, I don't think handguns are the primary weapon of choice in mass shootings. Those tend to be AR-15s and other multi-round kind of guns. What are you saying, Jerry? I also think we have to be vocal about police reform and oversight when we talk about gun bans. That's another element of it. American cops are just freaking hostile. Why? Because they have to treat you like you're armed and maybe mentally ill when they pull you over and they interact with you. Because it's so easy for anybody to get, I'm not saying in terms of mentally ill, in terms of like, you're not, they don't know if they can reason with you or not, you can calm, have a whole situation. Because so often in the United States, cops don't know what the situation is when they're walking into, when they pull someone over. Maybe this person's going to freak out on them, right? Pull a gun. They are always suspicious. And how are you supposed to protect and serve somebody that you have to treat like they're an armed suspect until you establish they're not? They're sort of guilty until proven innocent. The whole stress of life is elevated because of guns. Oh yeah, this is it, Abbott. I kept trying to come back to this point. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, another piece of shit, was asked in a live interview after they talked about the deaths and everything else, and he said, when it comes to mass shootings, Governor, what can people do? There was, this guy was walking in, he had all of these guns, what can they do? And Abbott actually blamed the victims. He said, well, we've had incidents in Texas where people who have concealed carry permits have been able to protect themselves a couple dozen times. So what people really need to do is to be aware of their surroundings and aware of what's going on. Holy shit, seriously, the governor of Texas is basically saying all Texans need to accept that they could be murdered by a white supremacist at any time, and so it's up to you to carry a gun and be aware of your surroundings. Every time you leave the house, apparently. They don't have any idea of, we need to create a Texas where people don't have to worry about a mass shooting at their local Walmart. We need to create a Texas where we don't need to have active shooter drills in our elementary schools. We want to create a Texas where we don't have to say ban firearms from when you come inside of when you enter a church or another house of worship or a public school or a bar or a theater or a cinema. We really have to, but this is what the NRA wants us to do. They want to basically break the American psyche into feeling like at any moment you could be murdered, and so you always have to carry a gun. It's a form of psychological abuse. The NRA has been sort of gaslighting Americans into accepting an abusive mass shooting situation, and to just accept that every once in a while, just some Americans and tourists or innocent people are going to be gunned down. And that's just the price of the NRA, gun manufacturers' profits. there's nothing we can do about it. Yes, there are things you can do about it. And I don't know what, if it's not the murder of children in their schools, if it's not mass shootings in a high school, if it's not, like, what is it? There's no, this is it. There's no breaking point. There's not going to be a breaking point for Americans when they stand up as one. We have to start talking about this lack of political will. We have the political will when it comes to popular opinion. What's lacking is the political will on the part of Republicans. And the more that we call that out, the more that we point the finger, the more we associate them with the corrupt, financially questionable, now under investigation, splitting apart NRA. The Republicans are responsible for these mass shootings. And yes, you can say the Democrats went along with it. I agree that there are too many pro-NRA Democrats. When you look at state legislatures around the country, they're dominated by the Republican Party, where these problems are. Texas is not a super, super blue state, even though El Paso is a blue city. So the question is, are Republicans going to do anything to stop white supremacist domestic terrorists? And I don't think they will. Yeah, James is saying if Sandy Hook, I think Sandy Hook and Parkland, I think wasn't enough to make gun control a thing. I don't know what would. Honestly, electing Democrats and Democratic women would make a big difference. Because women and men do have some different opinions in the aggregate on gun control. Men have dominated state legislatures and federal posts since politics began, and their preferences are overrepresented in policy. I think it's time that women, who are often more circumspect about guns and in favor of gun regulation, should have their concerns represented via elected representatives who substantively and descriptively represent their interest. So we're going to go through this again. We're going to go through another national routine. I don't think that, obviously you can't look to Trump to be the comforter in chief. Trump, of course, is awful when it comes to these national tragedies because, well, he was just the other night mocking the fact that Baltimore has a high crime rate. He's not a president to all Americans. He's only a president to white supremacists. And you can be from any background to be a white supremacist. I'm not just saying only white supremacists. There are people like Candace Owens who buy into the white supremacist system in order to personally profit from it. We have all kinds of people who are pro-white supremacy, the majority of whom are white. Vast majority are white. But there are also white supremacist collaborators, enablers, useful idiots. The entire Republican Party has been a useful idiot to white supremacists for the last 40 years. And now we're seeing the culmination and the actual realization of that Jim Crow plan, but extended to America. So when the piece of shit from the El Paso shopping center mass shooting talks about the Democrats becoming a one-party, the United States becoming a one-party state under the Democrats, well, one, he's a fucking racist piece of shit. Two, he's also an idiot because he doesn't understand how elections work. And if he had paid any attention, he would know that currently the way things are working out, everything is gerrymandered and tilted toward the Republicans. And, so, yeah, we have a problem with intolerance. We need to stop pushing aside the white supremacist point. We need, when the media does engage with these lone wolf white men, especially, they always, sort of like make them a special individual case. They don't generalize the way they would about like an ISIS killer. They need to generalize to other white supremacist killings and the domestic terrorist movement of white supremacist domestic terrorism within the United States. But within that, he was, claiming that because America is becoming more diverse, that white guy's special place wasn't going to be so special anymore. That is something we actually have to talk about as the white community and white Americans. looking forward, we have to embrace the diversity as opposed to pathologizing any other cultural influence. Because what's crazy about this idea, he even in the manifesto mentions the fact that the white people took away America from the native population. And he said the native population didn't care about mass immigration from Europe, and that's why the Native Americans lost their country. Again, this guy's an idiot. He's not particularly well educated. He's trapped in the 4chan, Lauren Southern, Great Replacement, Fox News, white supremacy, Rush Limbaugh. I wouldn't be surprised if he watched YouTubers like Crowder and Sargon and other far-right enablers and proponents on social media. We'll maybe find that out. But their inability to conceive of America as anything other than the white Protestant male power structure established in 1776 is a problem in the white community. It is a problem for white America. We need to talk about the fact that Jim Crow is in the past. And if you're not a segregationist piece of shit who wants to deny American citizens their rights based on their skin color, then we have to talk about how do we become allies of racial justice? How do we expand people's notion of America, American society, American culture? Because it's already there. You want to talk about the influence of hip hop, other areas of cultural influence, Cinco de Mayo and other things, that's a great part of our country. But as long as we as white Americans don't talk about the problem of domestic right-wing, far-right, white, usually guys, cis guys, domestic terrorist factory that's happening online, we won't stop this. We won't stop these mass shootings. Is it access to guns? Yes, that's part of the problem. Is it mental health issues? Yes, that's also definitely part of the problem. Is it a lack of access to mental health facilities and services and expertise and support and treatment and care? Yes. Is it also about raging racist and white supremacy and male fragility and white fragility and fear of a black nation? Yes. And we have to talk about all of them. And we always push the white people as being these guys as massive racists who want to kill people because they're not white or because they perceive them as being a threat to white culture, which doesn't freaking exist. We don't talk about that because that would force white Americans to deal with their own racism. And so far, unless you've been sort of, like raised in a family where these things are talked about or raised in a city where you've had exposure and interactions, if most Republican white America does not want to have this conversation. Republican white America sees themselves as the victims. And do they have it? Yeah, they have issues. People in Kentucky have healthcare issues. People in certain parts of the country have opioid addiction problems. But that doesn't mean that we don't talk about the white supremacists and we don't talk about the white racism. Yes, white communities have problems that we do talk about, but white mass shooters should be, when people want to talk about black on black crime, it's like, well, why don't we talk about white mass shooters first? Because that's, a universal, like that kind of threat is something we've seen going on and on. We've talked a lot about the black community and black on black crime. We've done a lot of talk about that. We've not talked about white America's white supremacy problem. And this is why Trump has been able to get away with so much shit. I mean, just look at the way that who talked himself in circles trying to pretend like Trump wasn't a racist. White people are in such denial about white supremacy. And our community's racist, not even past, present, and future. But it doesn't affect me as a white person, so, and I don't see how America can move forward until we have more conversations with white Americans about racial justice, about privilege. And I think in the younger generation, that those conversations are happening online. With the older people, not so much. Righto. We've been going for about an hour now. My coffee is getting cold and empty. So we're going to be taking a break here. I don't know how much longer I'm going to go in the next hour. To be honest, I kind of talked about this. We can go over my bookmarks a little bit, and maybe I'll end up going a full hour, but we might only go in a half hour afterwards. So because of that, I won't make a super long break. We'll do 10 minutes. That seems fair. And then I will come back at, like 5 minutes after the hour. If you guys want to have questions for me ready, if you tag me or just write Christine all caps or question or something, then when I come back from my break, maybe the first thing we can do is take some questions. So I will see you guys all in about 10 minutes. All right, and I'm going to have to turn the music up now. Do, 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 do. Bye-bye.
inside my head is sad to fade away. To hear your quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter the truth. And I spent 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm unrealized. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only been lonely, I feel so lonely. I need time to rain. The grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear your quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter my truth. And I spent 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm unrealized. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Tell me why and you tell me why to alter the truth. And I spent 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm unrealized. You tell me why to alter the truth. And I spent 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. One, two, three. Look into the eyes and show the end of the world. I would never do love, but I would call it vegan. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution, can't express me still, can't express.
Well, hey guys, Christy, I'm back. Got my cup of coffee. Did my little thing. I go like whatever it is that I do when I'm not with you guys. Actually, I can move this to. There we go. Hey. That was not a fun first hour, but life is like that, right? You have to deal with things as they come, and these are important conversations. So yeah, I got my big ass cologne. What do you call it? You Are Here collection from Starbucks. You guys can see that. I love my cologne mug. It is big enough to be a bowl for soup. That's pretty much the right size coffee mug for me. If you can If you can make a cup of soup or ramen noodles in it and eat out of it, then that's about the right size of a coffee mug for me. So, I love coffee. I do. I absolutely love it. It's one of the best things in life, in my opinion. That and sleeping until you wake up on a weekend. All right. I promised a little bit of interaction with the chat, so let's go ahead and do that. I guess I could do that. Can I? Oh, that's interesting. All right, let me give me 2 seconds, guys. I'll try to do the interface a little bit. The interface for my big one is kind of messed up right now by the looks of it. It looks a little too... I'm trying to do a live show thingy where... no, that's just not going to work. I'll go back here. I'm useless. And I will, instead of looking at this story, we're going to be looking at my bookmarks in a second anyway, but let me look at the chat and see what you guys have to say. I see DN Fan is into his, Hello everyone, how's it going? I hope everyone said they're going well. Right. Okay, so I saw James made a comment. Earthquake in Fukushima and Japan? God, this weekend's been shit. Yeah, Mike, I didn't see that news, so thanks for letting us know. I remember when they had that horrible earthquake and tsunami 2011. That was when I was interviewing for my job in Cologne, actually, and they had the whole reactor issue, so yeah. Mithril says, I've lost count of the number of YouTube comments promoting violence in the streets if Trump loses. It could come to that. I'm not even gonna try to say that that's not a serious threat anymore. We'll have Trump's MAGA shirts in the streets. I don't doubt it. And many of them will be, if Trump loses, we're going to see an increase in these kinds of attacks. I'm going to tell you. It doesn't mean he should win. You don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't say, okay, well, we'll have some state police enforcement in order to make sure there's no mass shootings. No, you need to, take political power and then do the people's will and make people safe. Thanks, for the amusing dogs. At least we have those guys. On the plus side, I taught Kevin something about using OBS by himself. Yes, I did. After the show we did on the happy hour, we stayed online afterwards and had a chat via Skype. Sorry. Morning. Kind of tired still and a bit out of it. I need more caffeine. We hung out and he installed OBS. I walked him through. Basically, if he would have watched my thing from the night before, which was an hour and a half, he could have done the same things, but I walked him through it. We went through my settings and his settings and set them up so that his settings were the same as mine as a base. And then, of course, I told him to watch the ePostvox videos if he has problems with his streaming bitrate or other elements. But yeah, it looked like it worked. I came in at the end. I showed up at the end of his live stream last night where he said he'd been putting video through and audio through and images as well. So in our conversations, I don't think I'm revealing anything in private. We did a lot that first night. Downloaded the software, installed it, went over the interface, went over the preview versus the preview window versus the studio mode versus the whatever other mode it is. Hold on, it's on my computer here. I can check. Studio mode. Oh, okay. Studio mode. Whatever. How to record to your desktop hard drive, how to stream, the stream key connection, building a scene, adding in sources, doing all your mixing, adding filters to your things. And at that point I went, okay, Kevin, that's it, because in order to add Skype, it's even more complicated. So he's like, okay, how do I get someone on Skype? I'm like, no, you're not ready for this. It's too much. You need to internalize this system a bit before you can go about the complications of adding Skype, because in Skype you've got to do settings on your side, and also you need to know a bit about what the other person has or be prepared to give them advice, and it was just too much for one night. His brain was already starting to explode. So we got him solo streaming, and I recommended he do that for about a week using the interface, and then either I would talk him through adding the NDI source via Skype, as per Epos Fox, or he could go watch the video. So yes, Kevin would not be doing OBS right now had I not spent an hour with him, helping him set up his environment. And it was fine. That's what mates do. And I'm happy to do that actually for quite a lot of people. So. Oh, okay. Ina and Step Back History are doing a stream together. Yeah, that would be an excellent one to watch. I like both of those creators. So big thumbs up from me. Coffee gives you anxiety. Oh, that's I get that for having too much caffeine in your system. There's also decaf coffee. Like I would drink if I was having anxiety issues, just because for me the taste of coffee and the association, like warm coffee flavor in the morning, is such a comfort for me. I'd probably switch to decaf, but I can relate to that because I can't drink mochas on a regular basis. For some reason, the combination of the cocoa powder and the caffeine together, if I have mochas like on 3 days running, I will start to get really bad anxiety, panic attack kind of feelings of, and just overwhelmed and jitters. So I get that. I totally get that. Tea man, yeah, well, if you live in the UK, I mean, while I lived in the UK, I switched to tea, if I'm honest. So, I did for a long time switch to tea. Becoming a coffee fiend, girl. Yeah, be careful. Pace yourself. And make sure, I always stop after 2 o'clock in the afternoon is my caffeine cutoff so that I can get to sleep at night. Would I be in favor of disarming American cops like British cops? I don't think that is a reasonable expectation in the short term or the near term. My goals, and of course, this is where I get into trouble with a lot of my lefty friends. I don't take a position on what I want to happen. I take the position on what I think is reasonably achievable within American society. I'm a pragmatist. I'm an American pragmatist. I don't know. I guess I don't know Dewey's philosophy well enough. I think it was Dewey, to ascribe myself to that particular form of pragmatism. But for me, I would rather see an achievable compromise that gets me half of what I want than holding out for revolution. There's a lot of reasons I don't support revolution. I support gradual change. But in this case, for me, I don't even need to have the police. I need the police to get better training. I need American police to be trained in diffusing situations, not controlling situations. And they're using tasers as opposed to your firearm right away. I think there is a real disconnect. Even people go into the military to do missions abroad, even peacekeeping situations, they have a far more formal set of rules and training that they engage in before they escalate into physical violence. And American cops, from what I understand from a military perspective, don't. So there's a lot we could do with putting more value on de-escalation, putting more value on diffusing, putting more value on using non-lethal means of detaining or subduing aggressive suspects before reaching for your gun. And I understand that cops have to protect their lives, but too often that justification of saving the officer's life has wiped away any moral or legal accountability for men that they murder and women that they murder and children that they murder. So I would prefer more de-escalation, a la the British police style. I think there's a lot of good training that could happen in the psychology of diffusing a situation as opposed to controlling it. The other thing about, in terms of de-arming, I'm not in favor of disarming cops, but I don't want the cops militarized either. And this was something that was brought up by Black Lives Matter as a movement. The militarization of our police force, the fact that they're wearing body armor and that they have military vehicles that are hand-me-downs from the Iraq War. All of that militarization of the police leads to a further disconnect between the citizens and the people who are supposed to be protecting them. And then you're just controlling them and regulating them, right? So I think there are a lot of other solutions to disarming police officers that we could take in order to make Americans more safe and make, therefore, cops more safe. Christy, what are my thoughts on Boris Johnson's premiership? I think he's going to be a disaster. I think he's just going to be one disaster after another, on a slightly different way than Trump. But from they just lost a by-election, right? So they lost a seat to the Liberal Democrats. Their majority is shrinking. They are basically giving fingers to the EU. Did I not see both today on Twitter before I came on air that some minister just told the EU, you have to negotiate or else? Like, the EU, you think the EU is threatened by the UK walking out? This is like a failure to understand your power and your negotiation points. If Britain thinks that what they can do is just dictate to the EU, yeah, we're going to have to negotiate everything now between now and the end of October. Otherwise, we're just going to leave. Fucking go. The EU doesn't care. Like the honey badger. They don't give a fuck. Now, they do care, but they're not going to care enough to work against their own interests. They're not going to be forced into a bad deal just to make things more convenient for Boris Johnson. Why would they? The British have never really understood the EU's position, I don't think, either as a government or as a populace. They always sort of project what they want the EU to be rather than accurately understanding the EU's position. And of course, the EU's position isn't just the EU. It's the German and the French, and so it gets more complicated. But frankly, Britons don't have a good understanding of, in my opinion, generally. Maybe individuals obviously would transcend this. But if you were to ask, like, Sargon, a Carl Benjamin, what is the actual EU position toward Britain? They couldn't accurately say it. They would come up with some cartoon version of it. So yeah, he's a disaster. Do I hate Corbyn? No, I don't hate Corbyn. I don't think he's the right leader. I think Corbyn is a fine representative. So when it comes to Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, he's a fine representative for his own constituency. I think Corbyn's problem is that he's too much of old Labour for the 21st century. He's too 1970s sort of Labour for this century. And that has hurt the party because he's not been openly for Remain. And as a consequence, politically, for Labour, a lot of Labour people have felt the need to move to some actual pro-Remain parties in order to get their political desires expressed meaningfully at the ballot box. Look at Cognitive Society and Kevin Logan. Both of them felt, well, one, the EU elections weren't as important. They didn't have a domestic impact in the same way, but both of them decided to vote for the Greens. Rather than, both of them are Labour guys, right? I'm not judging them. I'm saying that when you can't keep your own ID'd people, you've got a big problem nationally. And we see that in Wales. So I know Professor Roger Scully, he was in Cardiff. He does the Welsh polling barometer thing. Labour's tanking in Wales. They're not competing with the SNP in Scotland. They're not doing well in England. They're not. So I just don't think he's a good leader. If you think the role of a political leader is to win a majority for your party, Corbyn's not a good leader. Nancy Pelosi is. If that's your metric, if that's what you care about. Personally, that's what I care about. I would rather have a flawed party that I support in power than a party that I disapprove of running things the way they want. So he's not clearly pro-Remain. That's been a problem within the party. He's got a lot of internal fights. So I just don't, I don't see him winning a general election. I don't see Labour winning with Corbyn as their leader. And because I want to see the Tories out, personally, that's my personal preference, I think they need a different leader. So it's not about hating Corbyn, it's about thinking that he's unelectable. And having listened to a lot of voters at the snap election who were weighing him up, he's got real serious problems in the general, especially with English voters, which is skews to the Conservatives anyway, and that's where most of the votes are. Maybe Boris will try holding his breath until he gets a good deal. That's kind of where he had to, Fiddy. That's kind of where he is right now. I'm going to hold my breath until you give me a second deal. That's pretty much where he is. Yeah. British Green Party better than the USA Green Party. Yeah, because the Europeans are farther left generally than Americans are. I mean, we have the United States has has a, right? People are going to go, no, it doesn't look like. Here's the thing that I think people maybe in Britain or in Europe, not Britain in general, but I was thinking about this role of the small business person is especially important to the American narrative, the American political narrative too. And the idea of just going out and starting your own business, or the ability to start your own business, or people who have a job and maybe like do Mary Kay or Avon out of their house, or Amway, people who are that kind of entrepreneurial spirit or path of a career path. Because of the American expansion, you had a lot more people who have these small businesses, and that I do think kind of skews generally the political framework of America in a way that you don't get in Europe. There just isn't. It's not. It's becoming more popular, but just generally the whole idea of starting your own business and doing things on your own and just whatever isn't. I'm not saying it's not there. In Germany, you can start your own business like a bakery, but first you have to go to get training, and then you become an apprentice baker, and then you become a journeyman baker, and then after you become a master baker, then you can start your own business. See what I mean? In America, you could just, as long as you did health codes, you could start your own business even with crappy products. So there's a different approach. And I think that does actually change the entire political comportment of the United States in that way. And that's because, I'm going to come back to this, people who can't tell the difference between fascism being on the left and right. People who are like, oh yeah, the National Socialist Party, they were socialists. Like, no, they were a far right party. Socialism is on the political left. And they'll say, oh, they're both authoritarian in their power structures, therefore they're the same. It's like, no, ultimately, when I think about it, what really distinguishes left-wing and right-wing parties, it's usually the role of the economy. I mean, that's pretty much it. You can be a Republican and be pro-choice and all that kind of things. You can't be a socialist and be Republican. So I think fundamentally it's how government comports itself to the economy, or what economic system it favors and advantages within its policies that link it, more to the left or the right. You can be an authoritarian leftist. You can be authoritarian rightist. You can be authoritarian centrist. I mean, authoritarianism isn't limited to any political spectrum. It's just a way of enacting power. So, these are things I think about because I've got way too much time on my hands. Right, what else do we have going on here? Okay. Given what you said, don't you think leaving would be beneficial to the working classes at all? Oh, you mean leaving Europe? Or, you guys are having a conversation with yourself. Is that actual law in Germany? You can't open a bakery without years of training? I think it might be. I would have to look it up. But when I've heard other Germans talk about the system of what it takes to open up a business, I would have to look up like a master baker, not banker, baker, open company. I'll have to look it up after. That's my understanding. There's a National Bakers Academy. We'd have to look into it. Yeah, right there. The title of Master Baker is a requirement in Germany for opening an own bakery. Yeah, so it actually is a law. You have to know what you're doing in Germany before you can offer a service. That's what they're like. You have to be able to. This is probably just... The Academy is a state-certified master school for bakers. The title of Master Baker is a requirement in Germany for opening an own bakery. To be admitted to the Master Baker School of the National German Bakers Academy, one needs 3 years of education in a bakery plus an examination, as well as some years of experience as a baker. Right? Now, there are pros to that. I'm not saying that's a bad system. Not at all. There is delicious bread in Germany. I love the bread in Germany. When my dad comes to visit, he can eat donuts from the bakery around the corner at where I live, but he can't eat the donuts from his local bakery at Kopp's, in where he shops, Kopp's Foods in Wisconsin, because of all the chemicals and preservatives. So but that changes the way people feel about economic investment. You have to do a lot of things in order to start your own business, whereas in the States you just do it. You just open it up and then wait till somebody sues you, I guess, as the option. Now, I think we're pretty much done in the chat. So let's look a little bit at, oh, there are my bookmarks. That's what I wanted to. I want to refresh them as well because I added some during the break. So we're going to wrap this up. I don't know how much longer we're going to stay online. As I said, guys, I've been kind of tired lately. But there are some things that we should talk about that are a little less... Well, they're still about shitty men, but much less depressing. All right, let's all laugh at Roosh V, because why not? He's earned it. He's definitely attracted public ridicule. So he's saying some dumbass things on Twitter. And honestly, Roosh, you're such a man baby. You're such a freaking man baby. Pants were invented for men, not women. It's impossible for a woman to wear pants. That is, jeans, yoga pants, dress pants, leggings, dungarees, without sexualizing her body, since they highlight her legs, curves, and rear end. Women who want to be modest should not own pants at all. What a moron. Honestly, what he's saying is that when fabric is draped over women's bodies, because, right, so when he means, first of all, for the people in Britain, when he says pants, he means trousers. Actually, why am I even wearing my headphones? I don't have to. That's just habit from when the music comes in. I'm sitting here with my headphones and nothing on. But women who want to be modest should not own pants at all. Are you out of your freaking mind? Honestly? Like, again, this all comes down to this, sexist sense of entitlement that women should constantly be thinking about what could a random hypothetical man find sexual about my body, and then let me go ahead and protect men from their own thoughts by covering myself up and thinking about how do I cater my body in a way to make sure that men don't sexualize me. Which is impossible, because you know what? For like guys, straight guys, in terms this way, like from a straight perspective, women could wear anything and they will sexualize it. Back in the day when women had big corsets, like back in the Wild West, when they had, they would wear sleeved dresses down to here to not show too much, and lace across their décollage so they wouldn't show too much. I remember some guy who was in an interview like with Phil Donahue or something, maybe late 70s, early 80s. And this guy was super, super old. And he remembered back when it was thrilling to them when they would sit by and watch women cross, like almost like Wild West time in those corsets. They'd have to lift up their skirts and you'd see a bit of ankle. Between their shoes and the bottom of their skirts. And that was really sexually arousing. Men can sexualize anything. Men can sexualize anything. I'm not saying women can't sexualize anything. Here we're talking about Roosh's framework, which is it's women's responsibility to stop men from having sexual thoughts, which is impossible. It's literally impossible. You cannot ask women to do things to stop men from having thoughts. You have to talk to men about how do you deal with sexual thoughts. And this is the one that, we talk about getting away from responsibility. And this is patriarchy's way of getting away from the responsibility that men, and not all men, hashtag not all men, because a lot of men, unlike Roosh, can freaking deal with this. You see a woman, she's attractive, she has an attractive body, you have a sexual thought, then it leaves your brain and you get on with your fucking day. You understand that as a sexual being, if you have sexual thoughts, that's a natural thing that it's just going to come into your mind, and you need to find an appropriate time to deal with that, or just push it aside and get on with your day. There's no suffering involved. There's no pain involved. It just requires practice and a little bit of letting things go as opposed to focusing on them. But what Roosh wants instead is to take all that responsibility for his thoughts and say, no, the problem isn't me. The problem is anyone I find attractive. I can't be responsible for your shit, Roosh. Women don't have time to be responsible for your shit and this guy's shit and someone else's shit. You all need to deal with this yourselves. You're grown-ups. Take responsibility for your thoughts. And Roosh, if going outside and seeing women's bodies is such a problem for you, if you cannot process a sexual thought when you leave the house because you interact with a woman who has a body, there is one guaranteed way to make sure that when you leave, you will not be confronted with a woman's body that inspires a sexual thought in you. Blindfold yourself. Blindfold yourself and be led around by someone else, because that is your only guaranteed way of not seeing a woman's body that you could potentially sexualize. Women can't cover ourselves enough to stop a man from having a sexual thought. So if the thoughts are the problem, then you need to close your eyes. That's it. It's not my job. It's your job. Own it. Be responsible for yourself. So he was dumb as fuck. Yeah, and of course he got dragged. Oh my god, did he get dragged. All right, let's have a look at actually this ratio. Oh, damn. Damn, Rooch. Damn, look at that ratio. Damn. 24.3 thousand comments to 5.9 thousand likes. Ratioed. Oh man, it's boom, that blew up. Nobody liked that take. And then, because he's a crying man baby who can't take personal responsibility, he also then made another stupid ass post. Right. Leftists are raging against me for saying modest women shouldn't wear pants. Will they rage against Islam next? But okay, so rather than, like, that doesn't even make sense. He's saying a contextless of anything other than his stiffies, that women generally, not even like within a faith, just women universally should not wear trousers if they want to be modest. Which, first of all, can I just go back to this, and I don't know if my GIF is up here. It should come up pretty first, because it'll come up near the top, because normally Twitter pulls your own replies and puts them near the top. But basically, one of my replies was a woman in a knee-length skirt, but it was body hugging. So if women aren't supposed to wear pants, and our skirts, you know what? Skirts also hitch at the waist. And then they flare out, because you know why? Women have hips. Cis women and trans women, and their bodies change, right? If you have a waist that you wear a belt around, and you've got a body shape that has wider hips, you're gonna get a curve. You can't not have it. Unless you want us to wear, have anyone who identifies as a woman wear padding around our bodies so that we're just like a square block shape. Well, anything that we drape on our bodies is gonna have curves. So everything is gonna highlight our body because it's on our body. Idiot. All right, yeah. So then he decides to hide behind some homophobia, Islamophobia, saying leftists are raging against me for saying modest women shouldn't wear pants. And will they rage at Islam next? Well, first of all, I do rage at Islam, and because I see covering as a form of slavery. So don't need about the next. Already did that. She already done had hers. For those of you who watch RuPaul. All right, so don't. Just don't even try to drag me on that shit, because I do have a clear history of criticizing any patriarchal system that tries to use shame to enforce a kind of modesty standard on women that is not equally applied to men and also holds women responsible for men's sexual thoughts. That kind of projection is pathological and harmful and misogynistic. But of course, he's just hiding behind this Islamophobia to distract from the fact that he was getting dragged. And that's what I reported. Roosh made himself a laughingstock, whining that women are allowed to wear pants, so he dug out some Islamophobia as a distraction. And then here's my point. Maybe Roosh should consider blindfolding himself when he leaves the house. It's the only 100% guaranteed he won't see any butts. But this too got ratioed, I think, to hell. So let's see what that ratio was on that tweet. Less so, but still 2,300 to 1,000. So still a 2-to-1 ratio. He just got pwned, owned, dragged, and he deserved it. Guy's a piece of shit. He's a sexist piece of shit when he was trying to get laid, and now he's a sexist piece of shit when he's telling everybody else they shouldn't get laid. It's always about where they are in their lives with these guys. It's when they're in their 20s. It's like Saint Augustine did the same thing. When he's in his teens and 20s and early 30s, rogering away, and then they hit their 30s and 40s, and suddenly it's, oh, men shouldn't be having all this sex. Let's regulate everybody else's sex life. Now that I've got my end away for 15 years, putting sexual pleasure as, the most important thing in my life. Now that my hormone, like my testosterone levels are coming down a bit, and I'm starting to think a bit more straight, let's control everyone else's sexuality. Fuck off. Get the fuck out of here with that patriarchal, misogynistic bullshit. Nobody wants to know, Rouge. Go away. No, anyway, it's he should be dunked on, so that's also worth it. Yeah, and also, can we also dunk on Tim Pool as a total piece of shit? Tim Pool is a total piece of shit. This guy's supposed to be a so-called journalist. And when it comes to covering a mass shooting, in which at the time we didn't know the numbers for several hours afterwards, but there was talk about mass casualties. And this is what he was reporting on. Basically, he retweeted something about the mall shooting over here. That was one from 15 hours ago. Then this was his other original post. He was bragging that a TV station got trolled with a quote, "Gamers rise up," and that was his comment about the mass shooting in America. Look, the news station got trolled by some idiot about why these people were murdered, going about their daily lives in front of their family and friends in a Walmart. Tim Pool is a piece of shit as well. Like literally, that was, and then if you go up. This is the other thing. He's already moved on. Imagine if this were Antifa. Compare the amount of tweets Tim Pool dedicated to Andy now and his milkshaking and getting punched in the face to 20 people being murdered and as many or more injured. What did he spend more time on? What was he more outraged by? Where were his empathies and sympathies? And it's not with dead people who are being murdered by a racist. Oh, and this is also very Tim Pool. Very, very Tim Pool. Regarding the manifesto shooting, right? The guy's manifesto, on the El Paso shooting, the manifesto, this guy, Ford Fisher, wrote, "I read the purported manifesto. It's a shorter and more Amerocentric version of the Christchurch Shooters Manifesto, which it references. I won't share it, and I'd advise extreme caution with it because it shares tactical advice for future copycats." And then Tim Pool's right in there like, is it real? Of course he expresses a skepticism when it comes to white supremacists carrying out mass murder in America. But a guy getting a scrape on his eye and milkshaked, that is a national tragedy for white boy Tim. For white bread Tim here. For Miracle Whip. Cool Whip. Tim Pool. I've been listening to a lot of hip hop and white rappers who refer to themselves in various ways, and I'm picking up on that. Tim Pool, professional piece of shit, who does not cover mass murder, but will cover an apparent gamers rise up troll as more important than white supremacists murdering people in America. Piece of shit. We're surrounded by pieces of shit, basically. All right. Should we have a little bit of a lighthearted thing? I don't even know if this is lighthearted. I guess relative to where we are, it would be lighthearted. But I'm getting ready to wrap this up. I've been going for an hour and a half, which is fair for Sunday, I think. But before we close this out, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on now that we've switched over to OBS. So Are you real, Tim? Yeah, Tim Pool still thinks anyone buys he's a journalist. You have to be pretty credulous. You have to be a real big dupe to think that Tim Pool is a journalist as opposed to a shill. A useless right-wing tool, mouthpiece, protector, water carrier, defender. That's going to be the show, so let's talk a little bit about housekeeping management show stuff. So if you're not interested in that, you can say goodbye. Hope you enjoy the show. Sorry it was so depressing. We'll see what happens next week. If you are interested in just some of the technical stuff behind the scenes, let me tell you about what we're dealing with. So one of the problems I found, let me start over again in English. You probably noticed that this show was not put up scheduled except for like 50 minutes before it went on air. And that is because of the dumb-ass way YouTube now sets us up to live stream. The way they do it is that we have to I set up a live stream via OBS, but I can only do one at a time. So I can't have multiple events. So like when the happy hour finished on Friday, I could have immediately set up the Sunday one, but I just kind of forgot. And I was tired yesterday and I was exhausted and I had laundry to do and I had dishes to do and I had groceries. I had life. I had a real life going on. So I forgot to do it until this morning, but just going forward, I don't know how I'm going to be able to schedule things in advance so that they're locked. So it might just be the case that going forward, whatever is the next thing I'm going to do is going to be what's listed as scheduled on my channel. And I don't know how to communicate to you guys that I've got a regular Sunday show other than saying that I have a regular Sunday show. Because if I were to go like right now and set up a Sunday show for next Sunday, and then Kevin says, hey, let's do a happy hour, my happy hour stream would have to, or my Sunday stream would have to be converted into the happy hour stream, and I have to set up another one. So it's really not good. It's confusing. It's a nightmare. Yeah, YouTube needs to do better. So that is one thing I'm trying to figure out a workaround, and maybe there is some way of having multiple streams set up, and I haven't worked it out yet. But in that case, I know we made fun of the whole, what's the point of having a subscription if you're going to require people to put in the notifications, put on, you sign up to notifications on top of your subscription, right? Twitch is pretty fucking right wing. So I don't know about if Twitch is I would have to build up a whole new audience on Twitch. And I don't know how many people here would use Twitch. So there's all kinds of things. Technology generally needs a good beating. Yeah, that's good point, James. As a consequence, it might not be a bad idea to click the channel right now and hit the notifications, because that means when I set up a Hangout, you will be notified. Now, I might set up a Hangout and then change what it is, because I only have one way to do a Hangout, and something might come up and it'll change, but you'll still get notified. So Mixer is right wing. They all gone over there. I don't know who Mixer is. You will have to have a conversation about this some other time. The other thing that would be a possibility now that I'm in OBS and more stable is maybe once a month we can do call-ins. And if you guys want to jump in on Skype, we could, have a special once a month thing where people can come in for 5 minutes and we can talk live, or via Discord. So that's another possibility that we could do to make the show a little bit more interactive. And I would assume it would be regulars, like there'd be 5 or 6 of you who'd want to jump in, and then that would just be the weekend show. So some mediocre white guy streamer just got paid $1 billion to switch from Twitch to Mixer. Yeah, well, that sounds a mediocre white guy affirmative action. That's pretty much the capitalist system as it currently exists, isn't it? What else is going on? Oh yeah, I got demonetized. We talked about that. And I'm still of two minds about pursuing monetization on YouTube. Here's the upside of going back in my channel and deleting out all of the mirrored versions of the happy hour. That's what they're pretty much objecting to, I think, is that when I'm on a show with Kevin, I will then mirror it here. And because I've been so tired in the last several months, Kevin's been doing more of the hosting and I've done more of the mirroring. And YouTube sees that as me putting up copied content as opposed to it putting up the content I own and created. So what I would have to do is just like go back and delete out all of anything that I mirrored off of Kevin's channel. Kevin has a good playlist. He's done a good job of curating the whole happy hour. So that would possibly be a thing. And I wouldn't have the monetization. I wouldn't do that work in order to get the monetization so much for the ads. It's more that I know some people here like to do super chats, and with me falling behind on the podcast as well, I've now worked out something with somebody to help me do the production on the podcast, and I'm paying them like $10 an hour. Sorry. $10 an hour to do that work, because it's usually less than an hour's worth of work to mix up a podcast episode. But all of these are expenses. Like I'm paying for the Podbean. It's $15 a month for the Podbean account, and then $10 per episode to do the production. And then that suddenly starts to add up to a lot of money. And then the super chats, having a $5 or a $10 or $25 contribution, that could cover the podcast costs for a month. So that might be someone needs to get Patreon to create a super Patreon. Yeah, Jen, link it up, do a live super Patreon thing. So it's more about, for me, finding a way to offset those costs in order to produce the show. Because if the happy hour went away tomorrow, I'd cancel the Podbean and I'd save a lot of money. But because people seem to like it, I want to take it seriously, put up the episodes, and try to be more regular about it now that my year of crisis is over, I hope. These are all things that are like I'm kind of working on and deciding at the moment. So not my channel is in flux, it's just how I'm going to fund things is currently in flux. But on the other hand, I'm not unemployed. I'm not going broke. The money that I get helps either to fund the podcast or my technology. And I want to spend some time. I'm going on a holiday. I want to go to Ely Cathedral while I'm there and use the camera. I want to try out some more techniques. And hopefully, now that August is approaching, August is when my EU project ends. Everything has to be delivered to the EU by the 31st of the month, and I've already started assembling all of the things that need to be delivered because they all need like final reports, and those all have to be written. And of course, you can't do that like a week before they're due. I need a whole month to create the delivery package. I'm hoping that once that is out of the way, once my EU project ends and I'm just working on other things, that I will have more energy to do a regular weeknight show as well. And in that case too, it might make more sense for me to try to get the channel remonetized if I'm doing 2 live shows a week plus a happy hour. So, I don't know. Basically, I'm committed to showing up here every Sunday or Saturday, depending on my schedule, and to do 1 or 2 happy hour episodes a week. And that is my base. That's what I'm always going to put out for you guys. So you'll see me at least 2 or 3 times a week. And then where the channel goes after this year, after 2019 and all of this churning is done, I don't know. But that, just so you guys know, that's my commitment, is always a weekend show and the happy hour. And I'd like ideally to add a weeknight show for my Americans who don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch something. So, accept donations through Streamlabs. Yeah, I'm not dying to get myself money, but I don't want, it's like, I'll think about it later. So that was it. That's really boring technical stuff, but I wanted to kind of give you guys just an update on where I am in terms of my schedule, my production schedule, and other things. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up a Sunday show live while I'm abroad in the UK on holiday for the last 2 weekends, or the last 2 weeks of August. If I get a holiday, hopefully I won't be writing reports on my holiday. Hopefully I won't be submitting deliverables on my holiday. It could happen. But if I don't have the ability to do like a live show because my internet's not very reliable, I'll still create some content to upload to the channel. And yeah, okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I want to take this out for a trial. So I told you guys I signed up for a monthly payment thing to get the Huawei Pro 30, and the camera on this is, I guess the distance of it isn't quite as easy. it might be a little bit difficult to understand if you haven't been here, but physically there's the Rhine, the river Rhine runs through the downtown, or part of the central part of Cologne, near the old city, and along the banks of it. Sorry, across from the Cologne, on the Cologne city side, there's also across from the Cologne main city side, there's Cologne Deutz, which is like a suburb of Cologne. It's still a city of Cologne, but it's on the other side of the Rhine. And I was with some friends, sat near the cathedral, the dome, the Cologne Cathedral, having a kirsch on Friday at 5 o'clock. It's because it was the start of the weekend. And I got out my camera, I set it up on a tripod, and we could see across the Rhine River, there's this really tall building that has an observation deck on it. I wonder if I could show you guys on the map. I know this is totally random. You guys can leave, by the way. Yeah, you guys, you know what I mean. All right, so maps, dome, Cologne, yeah. So let's go to a Domplatz, Google Maps. Yeah, this should work. All right, yeah. Okay, so this is where we were. We were sat in the Vorplatz, the Bahnhof Vorplatz, or the main station front gate. And if you go across the Rhine here, there's it might be this building. No, that's a TV building. Yeah, with the observation deck. Okay, yes. It's massive. This building here is across the Rhine from the Cologne Cathedral. Right. So I was sat here. I was actually at Gaffel am Dom. We were drinking Kirsch at Gaffel am Dom. I set up my Huawei Pro 30 camera, and using the photo element of it, I went to 50 zoom, which is the strongest zoom you have. And from there, we zoomed in on the TV. I was able to zoom in on the TV tower across the river to the point where I could see individuals walking along the top of the tower. I mean, the Chinese have amazing spy camera ability. It's like, there's no reason to use 50 times unless you're a fucking peeping Tom. I'm sorry, unless you're at a concert or a baseball game and you got the cheapest tickets, but you want to set up and take pictures from far away. But it is insane. This entire distance, I was able to zoom in on and see as close as, let's see if there's like, I don't know if that's it. But anyway, I was stunned. I was stunned at the power, I was a little bit creeped out at how powerful my own phone is, because I could use it to spy on people in my neighborhood. It's that good. I'm not going to, because it's freaking creepy. But for me, of course, I'm not interested in the times 50. I'm interested in the times 15 and the times 20, because there's two things. I love to take pictures of, I love to take pictures of cathedrals, especially the insides of cathedrals, and I especially like to be able to get some of the details of it. And this camera has two perfect things for cathedrals. One, it has an amazing zoom ability. So when you're standing in a Gothic cathedral looking up at the ceiling and you want to focus in on the details that only the people who hand carved it at the top back in the 1300s could see. And they also have low lighting. And this camera has the best low lighting adaptation technology ever. So, sorry, I'm just geeking out over my new phone. It's so cool. I love it. So I want to take it out for a spin and use it and push myself to start making edited videos again come 2020. That will be my personal resolution, is to once a month do a more highly produced video of 10 to 15 minutes, on par with something closer to Kevin's Prager FU, or something not quite on par with Vadim because he's too good. But anyway, I've been talking for enough time now. I've filled 2 hours. Thank you guys for stopping by. Thanks for listening to me natter here, really boring at the end. I'm sorry that we had to have a pretty serious conversation about white supremacy, but we have to talk about it. We have to talk about this kind of stuff when it happens, and we have to talk about the solutions, and we have to talk about the problem, and especially the problems that aren't being talked about. But thanks for sticking with me for the rest of the show as well, and for making fun of Roosh. Yeah, I don't know when I'll be doing another happy hour, but I'm sure we will be doing another happy hour. And and if nothing else, I'll see you next week Sunday. So goodbye for me. Goodbye. Thank you, people in chat, people watching in the future. I've been Christy. You guys have been absolutely awesome. And we'll see each other again very soon. Promise. All right. Bye.